Support for this podcast comes from the Central Valley Journalism Collaborative, connecting communities with the resources, infrastructure, and networks to ensure a vibrant local free press.
From KVPR in Fresno, this is Central Valley Daily. It's Tuesday, November 19th. I'm Justin Sacher in for Elizabeth Arkalian. A revision to a state climate program recently got swift pushback, with some worried it could contribute to higher gas prices.
This program is one of the state's key climate programs. Basically what it does is it takes aim at greenhouse gas emissions.
We'll learn more about what the state's low-carbon fuel standard program is and what its effects could be. But first, today's headlines. Fresno Mayor Jerry Dyer is in the Middle East this week, helping promote the city in the nation of Qatar. Dyer posted a photo to social media yesterday from the country featuring him and several other mayors from around the U.S. He says he wants to promote Fresno as an investment opportunity in several sectors like healthcare, tech, and real estate. Dyer added that this trip abroad was funded by the Qatar embassy and not Fresno's taxpayers. The search for a missing Kern County nurse is continuing, now with the help of a Valley man who dedicates his time searching for missing people in waterways. KVPR's Crescencio Rodriguez Delgado reports.
Christina Murphy is a nurse from the city of Ridgecrest who went missing in July. Her vehicle was later found submerged in the Kern River along Highway 178. Divers tried to locate her body in the vehicle but came up empty. But Juan Heredia is still trying. Heredia became well known this past summer after he helped find 5 missing people in Valley Rivers. He announced on Monday that he would be spending 2 days searching for Murphy. Murphy's missing persons case has drawn the attention of thousands online, and Heredia said he hopes he can finally bring her family some closure, just as he has for others. For KVPR News, I'm Crescencio Rodriguez Delgado.
A legal group is warning the Merced City School District that a statement read before public comment at its meetings is potentially misleading. Brianna Vicari from our newsroom partner, the Merced Focus, reports.
Before the public can weigh in on general matters during Merced City Schools board meetings, they typically hear this message from the board president, Alan Brooks.
It is important for the members of the public to understand that derogatory comments against district employees or others made in board meetings can be actionable as defamation under certain circumstances.
The First Amendment Coalition says this statement may undermine democracy because it could dissuade residents from criticizing elected officials, a right protected by the First Amendment. Last month, the coalition sent a letter to the school board urging them to disavow that statement. If it continues to be read, the district could expose itself to legal action. Brooks, the school board president, says the statement is a response to heated board meetings in prior years. Despite the letter, Brooks says the board is committed to free speech and transparency. I'm Brianna Vicari.
A community solar project celebrated its grand opening on Monday in Visalia. The project is one of 3 in the valley, built as part of the Disadvantaged Communities Green Tariff Program. The state program offers clean energy at a discount for communities where homeowners are unable to afford solar installations on their own roofs. About 3,700 Visalia area residents are expected to benefit.
Support for Central Valley Daily comes from Fresno Mazda, part of the Prieto Automotive family, with special holiday financing deals on select models through the end of the year at the new showroom on Blackstone and Barstow. Information at myfresnomazda.com.
And now to our main story. Earlier this month, the California Air Resources Board, also known as CARB, voted to revise one of California's key climate programs. The decision will tighten fuel regulations across the state and give incentives for low-carbon fuels. However, many critics of the decision say tighter regulations will make California's already expensive fuel prices even more expensive. According to AAA right now, the average California unleaded gallon of gas costs $4.46 a gallon. That's nearly the highest in the country, just behind Hawaii, and almost $1.50 more than the U.S. national average. Alejandro Lazo is a reporter with CalMatters who's been covering these developments. He recently spoke with KVPR's Elizabeth Arkalian to explain more behind this decision and the program.
The California Air Resources Board recently voted to make some adjustments to the low carbon fuel standard. This program is one of the state's key climate programs. Basically, what it does is it takes aim at greenhouse gas emissions. Again, those are those climate change causing gases that come from transportation fuels, and transportation is a massive source of greenhouse gases in the state. So it takes aim at transportation fuels such as gas and diesel, but also alternative forms of fuels. And the aim is to reduce the carbon footprint of all those fuels that we use as consumers to get around the state, and also that businesses use to ship goods and products across the state. So it's a pretty far-reaching program. The thing is, they don't go in and require each fuel to be at a certain individual level in terms of its carbon footprint. Rather, the program functions as a sort of market system. They set this standard, if you might call it a threshold, and if you meet that standard, you're awarded credits. And those credits are worth money. They're traded and sold on a marketplace. They have a sort of going price. And if you produce fuels that meet the standard or are, exceed that standard, in other words, are cleaner than that standard, then you get these credits and they're worth money. But if you don't meet that standard, then and you're a fuel producer and your fuels are too carbon emitting or too carbon heavy, then you have to go out and buy those credits from the companies that are producing the cleaner fuels. And it's this system overall that's aimed at reducing the overall carbon footprint of the fuels that are used in the state. It's a pretty complicated program, but the board says it's been pretty successful overall.
And so this vote that they had, tell us about that and why it was controversial. You reported it was one of the most controversial decisions that this board's made.
Yeah, absolutely. The reason it was controversial was for two reasons. First, a lot of environmental activists in the state, say that the concept of sort of encouraging transportation fuels, specifically fuels, things that you burn, is sort of counterproductive in the first place, that we should be moving toward electrification. And then, of course, it was also very controversial because this decision, this tighter standard, is likely to increase gas prices in the state of California.
Yeah, that was a touchstone of this vote. And can you explain that impact that it might have?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as we discussed, this program is kind of a market program. So if you're a producer of fuels, you have to spend money to make the fuels cleaner, or you've got to buy these credits if your fuels are not clean enough. And so that makes producing fuels more expensive in the state of California. And more often than not, companies pass on those costs to consumers, and that raises the price of gas in California. Now, there's been a lot of debate over how much. The Air Board has said that it's typically, traditionally, the costs have been 8 to 10 cents per gallon of costs passed through from this program. But they did release this initial assessment of the program that they were required to do last year. It said that it was going to raise, that it could, one potential place where gas prices could go very quickly. And this was sort of at the most, could be, 47 cents per gallon next year for gasoline and 59 cents for diesel fuel. The Air Board has kind of disavowed that estimate, says, no, that's not an accurate estimate as to how much it's actually going to go up. And any increase in gas prices has obviously been a big concern for folks here in the state of California, where costs of everything is really high. I mean, groceries, housing, and so on.
Now, we know former President Donald Trump will be returning to office in January, and he clearly has a very different climate agenda than officials in California. In what ways could Californians feel that difference? Is there going to be a challenge to those laws?
Yeah, well, I mean, as I understand it, where a lot of the challenges might come from are separate from the low carbon fuel standard debate. I mean, if this does come up again, I think the issue of costs and gasoline prices will be something that the president-elect does address and speak to, and I'm sure criticize the state for. But perhaps, most importantly, to enact a lot of its emissions rules. Those rules require approval from the EPA under the Clean Air Act. And the state officials in the state are waiting for that approval. They're hoping that the EPA approves a raft of different rules that the state has enacted over the last 4 or so years. If the EPA under the Biden administration does not do that, the Trump EPA, it's widely thought, is likely to simply not approve them, revoke those waivers. And if the EPA does approve them, the Trump administration is likely to revoke those rules, or at least try to revoke those rules. They did that under the Obama administration. So that is significant. Obviously, what the Trump administration does with the EPA and what it does with some of the big sort of climate spending programs that the Biden administration enacted will also have repercussions for the state of California. The state is getting ready for all of that, but we don't know.
Now that this vote on the low carbon fuel standard's been cast, do we know what's next for CARB and for Californians?
Right. Well, it's specifically for the Air Resources Board, they have been discussing taking on a revision of another climate program that, like the low carbon fuel standard, takes aim at emissions, but this one more from businesses. That's the cap and trade program. It's another market-based system that's rather complicated that does regulate emissions from businesses in the state. So that'll be taken on by the Air Resources Board sometime in the near future. You're also likely to see them advocating for their own rules to be approved by the EPA, as we discussed before the incoming Trump administration takes place, or defending those rules with the Trump administration in place.
That was CalMatters reporter Alejandro Lazo speaking with KVPR's Elizabeth Arkalian. And that does it for today. If you have feedback or a story idea, we'd love to hear from you. Email podcast@kvpr.org. Today's episode was produced by Jonathan Linden and KVPR with support from the Central Valley Journalism Collaborative. I'm Justin Sacher. Find the latest local news anytime at kvpr.org.
No matter what happens in Washington, the NPR Politics Podcast is here for you. For the latest news, insights, and analysis from the election and beyond, listen to the NPR Politics Podcast.